We have to continue the spirit of service which our parents exemplified throughout, Friesen's cry. The children of Jacob T. and Lola M. Friesen are pleased you are here to be part of the dream we have to continue the spirit which our parents exemplified throughout their lives as seen in their work with the Mennonite Church. Both Jacob and Lola grew up in Mountain Lake, Minnesota, and graduated from Bethel College. Together with their first spouses, each served pastorates in the Mennonite Church, ranging in locations from Beatrice, Nebraska to Bluffton, Ohio, and from Ritzville, Washington to Freeman, South Dakota. Following the deaths of their spouses, they remarried, creating a blended family. Settling in North Newton, they became members of the Faith Mennonite Church. Dad supported the initial development and fundraising for Bethel Kidron Village and served as chair of the board for 1 year. As they aged, Bethel Kidron Village became their beloved home. We watched and participated in Dad and Mom negotiating that journey of aging. Many of the staff remember Jake and Lola fondly. Dad was always asking what-if questions. I remember conversations during which he wondered out loud how Bethel College and Kidron Bethel Village could work together to bridge and strengthen the ties between these two institutional communities. We were pleased to hear that Bethel College nursing program and Kidron Bethel Village were working together to build the facility we are sitting in now. To encourage this partnership between Bethel College academic programs and Bethel College Village. My siblings and I endowed this symposium to foster understanding and cooperation by presenting topics of interest to the aging community and their caregivers. I would like to call your attention to the beautiful artwork on the acoustical panels at the back. These were done by Bob Regier, who was Lola's only brother. I would like to acknowledge the support of Derek Yoder and Chris White with Kidron Bethel Village and Pam Thiessen of Bethel College for their parts in bringing this evening together. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to our second biannual Senses and Aging Symposium. Thank you all for coming out tonight to listen to these two incredible speakers. I'm Shelby McCauley, Director of Nursing here at Kidron Bethel, and I'm honored to be partnered with her team and excited to introduce you to our first guest speaker. She is the founder and director of Comfort Matters, a nationally and internationally recognized dementia care education program at Beatitudes campus in Phoenix. With 39 years experience as a long-term care provider and researcher, please give a warm welcome to Tena Alonzo.
Hello, and thank you, Mr. Friesen, for such a wonderful explanation of why tonight is possible. I just want to begin by asking you the question, how many of you know someone, or perhaps several someones, who are living with dementia? It makes sense that most of us know someone who is living with this disease. We know that across the United States, there are nearly 6 million people who are living with the disease who have been diagnosed. What we also know is that as we age, the likelihood that we will live with dementia is increased. So it is my absolute pleasure this evening to talk to you about something that I hold very dear to my heart, and that is the opportunity to not only understand what goes on in our brain when we are living with dementia, but the connections between our senses and physical pain and what all of us can do to make life better for the person who is experiencing dementia. So hopefully it works. Did it change? Fantastic. So I bring you greetings from the Beatitudes campus in Phoenix, Arizona. And it is wonderful to bring those greetings to you. I represent 700 older adults living on 37 acres and nearly 400 staff. And one of the things that has made the Beatitudes campus home to so many people is the opportunity to create a living laboratory in which we're able to explore certain aspects of the aging experience and make sense of how do we create well-being, how do we create comfort, how do we ultimately serve people in a way and create living opportunities that are worthwhile. And so tonight what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about this intersection between the brain, physical pain, and the senses, and how we can make it better. It's all about that. So some of our opportunities this evening in this session is to look at that connection. What is the connection between our senses, hearing, sight, taste, touch, smell, and physical pain? Most of the time, we're not thinking about those senses and how ultimately they can impact us. We're going to look at how we recognize pain. Many of us understand that as the person becomes more and more confused, their ability to communicate verbally will be impacted. It will be impaired. And if someone cannot tell us that they hurt, how do we make sense of it? How do we ultimately determine when relief needs to be provided? And what can we do ultimately that will make the difference and create opportunities for living well? We have to start at the very beginning. And when we do, we understand that from the Alzheimer's Association, dementia is a neurological disorder that impacts thinking, reasoning, judgment, impulse control, all of our thinking abilities. And because it weakens our brain, it also weakens our body. And for those of us who either serve or love folks who have trouble thinking, every day we see that they struggle to do things. And because they struggle, they need adaptations and assistance to live well. What we've learned about dementia is that there are currently 104 different kinds that have been identified. Now, some types of dementia are very common, like Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia. All of the ones that you see on the screen, we commonly see in the general population. But there are dementias that are much more rare, and they look different. What we also know is that, unfortunately, people can have more than one type of dementia. And that often when that happens, we really struggle to make sense of what is going on in the person's brain. Now, we hear all kinds of things about dementia, don't we? We hear it in the media. We see television programs about dementia. And most of what we hear is how over time people decline. And indeed, this is a terminal condition. It will result in the individual's death unless some other illness kills them first. Now, that's always hard to hear. And as someone who has sat on both sides of the desk, so I've had 4 members of my family with dementia, and I have served people who live with dementia for nearly 40 years, I know how hard it is to hear that the person I love cannot think, cannot do, is not the same as they once were. But we spend so much time looking at the disabilities that occur when people have trouble thinking that we really don't take time to consider what is actually going on in the brain. So I want to share a little bit of good news about what we know for people who are living with dementia. So here's the good news. Not everything is taken away when the brain is impacted. What we know remains intact, number one, is our ability to know when we're comfortable and when we're not. And this is an incredibly adaptive part of our brain. When we're a child and we encounter a hot stove for the first time, we might be tempted to put our fingers over the flame, right? And once we do, we're like, oh no, that's not for me, and I'm going to pull my hand back. So knowing when we're comfortable, knowing when we're not, is an incredibly important part of being a human being and in protecting ourselves. For people who are experiencing dementia, even people who are profoundly confused, that part of our brain remains intact. And for those of us who have had the honor and the privilege of being with someone when they are transitioning from this life, have we not seen the evidence that they know when they're comfortable and when they're not, and when they are uncomfortable, we take steps and measures to improve their comfort. What we also know about our brain is that we are able to communicate through our actions. Now, we've been doing this since we were babies. When we were born, what did our mother and father want to hear? They wanted to hear our cry, right? Which said that we're okay. So from the beginning of our lives, we've been communicating with the world around us. So if something wasn't right, what did? We cried. And then our mothers and our fathers came and they made whatever was wrong right. What we know is that people continue to be able to do that no matter how confused they get. So when they can no longer communicate through their words, they can communicate through their actions what works best for them. And probably the most profound thing, and how I wished I would have known this as a young practitioner, the most important thing that I want to share with you is that our emotions remain intact. So how we feel is so much more important than how we think. And although our thinking abilities become greatly compromised, often not working very well at all, our feelings continue to be profound and robust. And we can get information into our brain via our emotional center. Now, you may be saying to yourself, how do we do that? If thinking is broken, if that doesn't work, how do we get information into a brain? How do we help people who are really struggling with all of those thinking things? Why would that make a difference? Why would you start by talking about this? The truth is, through our five senses, we're able to carry information into our brain and to influence an experience. Now, we know as we age, smell might be compromised, especially compromised for people who are living with Alzheimer's disease. Sight may be dim. Hearing may not be what it once was. Touch may feel a little bit muted. And taste, well, we know that our taste buds are not always our friends as we age. But inasmuch as our senses are intact, we can bring information into our brain that allows us to create quality of life. And when we are trying to make sense and help a person live their best experience when they are living with potential pain, then we need an all-hands-on-deck approach. And one way of doing that is to get information into our brain using our 5 senses. Communication in the brain. All right. All of the different parts of our brain that once worked well may not work as well as they once did. But if we're able to really help the person make sense of what is going on based on their senses, we can do something that creates well-being. Is that all our pictures with the senses there? Communication in the brain. We're back to communication in the brain. What is pain? I'm just not at the right, I think I should come down there because I'm not at the right trajectory. Okay. So what is pain? How do we connect all that stuff that's going on in the brain? How do we connect all of our senses? What is pain? When we look at research, and I'm a researcher, practitioner, but when we look at what pain is, we know that it is a very individualized experience. So pain is whatever the person says it is. It happens whenever they say it does. And what I think is important to know is that many people see pain differently. Do we know folks who respond in ways that seem extreme when they're in pain? So we think they've got a little hangnail and it hurts. Have we also seen people that we know that whatever they are experiencing should be profoundly painful, and perhaps it isn't? So what we know is that it is a very, very individualized experience. And it may have lots of context related to our age, our culture, our circumstances, and many other factors that we just don't even have time to talk about tonight. So physical pain really is whatever we say it is. Now, how many of you have perhaps gone to a medical provider and they didn't think you really hurt? I would defy most humans. I've got people raising their hands. Thank you. Most humans have been to the doctor, had some discussion with them, and perhaps did not feel as supported as they would have liked related to physical pain. That is often because all of us see it, feel it, experience it differently. And it's difficult for medical providers to make sense of that. What we also know when we look at pain, change, fantastic, is that it's a wide range of different responses. You know, it can be no pain. It can be minimal. Or it could be unimaginable. It could be so severe. And I love looking at it in terms of color because it kind of brings into clarity. You know, if it's not painful, it's kind of cool. But if it really hurts, it's red hot. And sometimes when we're asked to identify our pain, we're able to do that based on a thermometer. The higher the mercury, the more it hurts. And so as we're beginning to make sense of what pain looks like for somebody who can't really tell us, and most folks who have moderate to advanced dementia, they're not going to be able to tell us. We know that we're going to have to take a little bit deeper dive into looking at things so that we can make sense of it. What we also know is it's important to kind of look at pain in a couple of different ways. As we age, there are many reasons for pain, and we'll talk about those in a couple of minutes. But there are pains that are chronic. You know, I fell off a truck or a ladder a few years ago, and I stove up my back, and now it hasn't felt quite right for a while. And there are pains that are acute. I took a tumble getting out of bed, caught my heel, and I fell down on my knees. Those are different kinds of pain. And when we make sense of it, it helps us better describe what is going on. Now, see, I'm talking about pain in terms of my personal experience. This is the same for folks who are living with dementia who may not be able to tell us. They have chronic pains because they fell off a ladder too, and they have acute pains because maybe they took a tumble when they got out of bed this morning. How we treat those pains, how we examine that pain will likely be really different. And so it should be. What we also know is that pain is a fickle thing. There's joint pain, and there's belly pain, and there's neuropathic pain, and there's all kinds of pain. But there are also really simple reasons why people can be in pain. I think about an empty belly can be incredibly painful. All of the things on this page are things that everyone in this room can either fix themselves because they can help the person, or they can cause them to be fixed. So they can talk to someone who will help them, help the person that they care about get some relief. So these are things that we're not looking at doing extra ways or extra things to try and correct. These are things that are in our common everyday life that we potentially can make a difference about. And one of the things that I think is really, really important to think about is when we're sitting in uncomfortable positions for too long, what that may do to us. Because sometimes we may not be able to move about. Okay. So many of us in this room probably could talk chapter and verse about all of the things on this page. So many things create discomfort. Spinal stenosis. Spine isn't working like it once did. Irritable bowel. Acid reflux. Maybe not carrying as much weight as we once did, and now we're sitting on some bony prominences. Fragile skin, and one that I think we don't talk about enough, and that is depression. What I want to tell you is, when we look at the research, there is a strong connection between depression and physical pain. And the troubling part is, if it's not identified, depression or physical pain, then what we know is people do not live well. So when we think about older adults in particular who have trouble thinking, the word pain often doesn't compute. And we know that when we look at research, that there are other words that are much better than saying pain. In fact, many is a day I've seen somebody seated, rubbing their knee, which is why I'm seated today, because I had a procedure on mine earlier this week. But they're sitting there, and they're rubbing their knee, and you say to them, does it hurt? Are you in pain? They may respond to words like hurt, ache, or sore, but the word pain doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So when we're thinking about talking to folks who have pain, one of the things that's important to do is really vary the words. The words that are most favored these days are hurt, ache, or sore. Now, As people continue to age, that may change. And unfortunately, we'll just have to wait until new research comes out, then we'll change the words again. Change? Okay. So here's what we know about dementia and physical pain. We know that for many people who are living with dementia, they have a more intense experience with pain. Now think about it. If I have trouble thinking, I can't just go lay down when I have a headache because I can't think to do that. I can't think that that would be an important way to perhaps feel better. So we know that for many folks, it is a much more intense response. What we also know is that often people act strangely, and they're really telling us that they hurt. They just don't have any other way to do it. We were taking care of a gentleman. His name was Quentin, and his family gave me full permission to talk about his situation and to use his name. Quentin was a lovely man. He had moderate dementia when we met him, and he had been asked to leave another community because he would yell at people, and he would take swipes at his peers, and he would often fight with his staff. And I would imagine many of us have met somebody just like Quentin. He was just probably named something else. And what we recognized with Quentin was that in the morning, he was a lovely guy, just the nicest man you ever want to meet. And when we spoke with his family, we asked a lot about him, and they said, look, our dad was one of the nicest gentlemen you would ever know. Would he yell at someone? Absolutely not. He was in business for years. He was just the nicest man. Would he try to hit folks? Absolutely not. Never even raised his hand to us. And so we began to explore why Quentin was doing the things that he was doing. What we noticed in the afternoon is that it looked like he was walking on eggshells. So he could barely put his feet down, he could barely walk, and we suspected that he had pain. And he did. The way that Quentin expressed his discomfort was by getting ornery and irritable with other folks. Now, the simple solution to this was to treat him for pain. And when we did, guess what happened? He blossomed. He was no longer demonstrating things that we did not want to see. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. And he was just generally pleasant to be around. He was showing us that he hurt through his actions. Now, because people demonstrate what's going on with them through their actions, if pain is present and it's not treated, there's a whole bunch of bad things that can happen, which is why I love being here with you tonight and talking with you about these things. Because if we know what's going on, then ultimately we can make it different. I want to tell you, students, and I'm just talking to you for a minute, I wish I knew this stuff when I was beginning my practice. I didn't know the strong connection between pain and people's actions. And I didn't understand what would happen to them if pain wasn't treated. I did not know that ultimately I had the power to make their life better. And I'm so grateful that I know now. Now look at this lady. How do we know that she hurts? We're looking at her face. We're looking at the grimace. What is the sense that we're using to make that determination? We're using our eyes. What is she doing with her knee? And I feel her pain, again, because I had a procedure done. What What is she doing with her knee? She's holding it. We can clearly see in this picture, because we have our eyes, that she hurts. And if we understand that, we can do something to make it better. Change? Now, I work a lot with families and with friends of folks who are living with dementia. And one of the more common things that I hear is, but they don't complain of pain. When a person has moderate dementia, they can't. They just can't. So as the disease progresses, it becomes more and more difficult, even if they're still talking, to connect this to all of this, make sense of it, and tell us. And so it is an unrealistic expectation to think that people are going to be able to do that. So folks can't complain of pain, but they can show us that they hurt. And of course, if they can show us that they hurt, there are things that we can do that will make it better. We can use our senses to make sense of what is going on for them. How do we use our senses? What can we do ultimately that's going to make a difference? Because we have the ability to do this. When we are with someone who has difficulty communicating verbally, what do we see? Remember the picture just a moment ago of the woman who's in pain. What do we see? Very important that we're using our senses to make some determination about what's going on. What do we see? It will tell us so much about what's going on. And the next thing is, what do we hear? Because often there is a verbal response to physical pain. What do we hear? And if we're able to make some sense of those things, it allows us to have a conversation with people about what might make it better. Now, many of you probably received a little bitty card that's laminated. This is how we make sense of whether or not someone is in pain. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail about it, but it uses our five senses to make sense and determine what's going on. And you may be saying, well, this looks like some nursing stuff, and it is. It was actually created by a PhD nurse and a geriatrician, actually a geri-pal internist, and it was a way of really inviting everyone to the party. So this is called a pain ad, and it uses our senses to make sense out of pain. What do we hear? Vocalization, breathing, words, groaning, moaning allows us to make sense. What does the person's expression look like? Do they look sad? Are they fearful? Does it look like they hurt? Body language. Are they grabbing parts of their body? Are they rocking? Are they pushing us away? Are they telling us they don't want to do something? And perhaps the most important part, and the one that I like the best, is consolability, because it uses many of the senses. What can we do that will help the person and maybe make it better? Are we unable to console them? In which case they've got very serious pain and we need to pull out all the stops and try something. Now, I said a minute ago, this looks like nursing stuff, this looks like physician stuff, but it was created in a way that all it takes is observation and You don't have to be a medical provider to use it. Family members can use it, clergy can use it, certified nursing assistants can use it, social workers can use it. Family members, friends, anybody who has interest in determining whether somebody hurts or not can use it. And what's nice about using PainAd is it allows us to have a conversation around a pretty complex set of situations, because we know that sometimes pain is difficult to make sense of. Now, we can recognize pain. We've had a moment to talk about that. When we recognize pain, how do we use the 5 senses to make it better? Remember, the person's emotions are intact. We can get information up into the brain, bypass all the broken parts, which are the thinking abilities. We can bypass that by using the person's 5 senses. And although everyone in here, we don't have trouble thinking, let me just illustrate something to you real quick. When you hear your favorite song, everybody's got one. When you hear your favorite song, how quickly does that impact you? In nanoseconds, right? So it can change, when I hear my favorite song, it can change how I feel instantly. So that connection in our brain between our 5 senses and everything else that's going on up there is incredibly important when we think about quality of life. And when we think about people who are in pain and perhaps giving them relief and ease and helping them live better, especially when it's chronic, our 5 senses are our friends, even if they don't work as they once did. But that's how we're able to get up into our brain and make a difference. I even think about, what about when you smell your favorite holiday foods and whatever your holiday, how does that change your disposition? This is the same for everyone. And when somebody is experiencing pain, it can be incredibly important to change their disposition. Okay. So, if we believe that physical pain is present, what are we going to do? First, going to use our senses to detect it. We can become really good detectives. Doesn't matter whether we're family or we're clinical folks, we can use what we know to make a difference. Then the next thing we need to do is talk to the medical provider. Because there may be some things we can do, not within our purview, but certainly within theirs, that can make a difference. We're going to do what the doctor says, right? Because they're the ones who know our person best. And then the most important part, especially for all of us, is we're going to use their senses to manage pain. Because we can. And because it will make a difference. How do we do that? Okay, how do we do that? We look at their 5 senses. What's their favorite thing to see? What is their favorite thing to hear? What is their favorite thing to touch? What is their favorite taste? What is their favorite smell? And if we've given the person, perhaps we're treating them for pain as the physician, the medical provider has indicated, we can use these things in tandem for a much better outcome. And if you think about it, when we're young and we don't feel so good, do our parents not help us lie down? Maybe they give us a little medicine, maybe they don't. And they help us feel better through lots of things that probably are not medicine related. So looking at things in terms of how do we make a plan? Now, the reason a plan is important is if we have not planned to make something happen, will it be possible to do that? Probably not. I actually know people who have a shoebox and they've got all those favorite things in the shoebox when the person has pain, so that they're ready and they're able to use them. So let me tell you about Ruth, the dear soul, known Ruth for a long time. Ruth had had cluster headaches all of her adult life. Every month to 6 weeks, she would have several days of having severe head pain. Now, when Ruth was younger, she knew exactly what to do to manage that problem. But as she got older, she developed dementia and she struggled to do things for herself. It became a real problem and was impacting the quality of her life. So what did we do for Ruth that made it better? We created a plan that would allow her to get some relief that wasn't just about the medicine. Of course she had her medicine, but was really important. So here's Ruth's plan for physical pain. First thing is, she loved to go to her room and she would sit down in her favorite recliner with a blanket over her legs, very special blanket that she loved very much. And she loved soft gospel music, and anything by Fanny Crosby would work for her. So the older the hymn, the better. And I hear some people chuckling out there because you know what a favorite Fanny Crosby is. She loved a little black tea with milk and sugar, had to have those two in there, and the smell of lavender made such a difference. Now, if she went in there, often within a short time, Ruth would feel better. But it was all of these things that really helped her feel better through her senses, not just through the medication that she was taking. We know that sometimes we benefit from medication. Sometimes medication is the first thing that should be considered. So this is not a talk about foregoing pharmacy, but an opportunity to pair pharmacy with non-pharmacy kinds of things. So sometimes medication is really needed. We know that sometimes people have joint pain. Perhaps Tylenol will help. Perhaps we need to hit it with something harder. And sometimes it really is needed. What we also know is that often people who are living with dementia, well, we misinterpret the things that they do and their actions as needing psychotropic meds. What we know is that those are medications that do not treat pain and should be avoided. They really make a difference when they're not used. In fact, they can make things worse because what we know is that they can create additional confusion and make it more difficult for the person to really tell us what's going on. So just a few thoughts as we're wrapping up. When we look at what is going on in the brain, we are often confronted with all of the things that go wrong and not with the things that stay right. Although people have trouble thinking, it weakens the brain, it weakens the body. What we also know is that emotions are intact, the ability to communicate through your actions are intact, and you know when you're comfortable, when you're not. Therefore, the person who is living with the dementia is an expert on their own comfort, and we cannot be. What we also know is that pain is a very individualized experience. Whatever the person says it is what it is. What we also know is that folks who are living with dementia are likely going to have a much more robust reaction to physical pain. And it makes sense because they can't cope and do things like they once did. What we also know is that we can use our 5 senses to enhance a pain response, we can use our five senses and make a plan for helping folks live better when pain is present. And that when we do, people live well. Thank you guys so much for your kind attention and for helping me keep the slides right. I think we're going to have just a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and my colleague Mollie Heiden is going to talk with you about some things that are really important.
Let's give Tena another round of applause for her amazing presentation. I would now like to introduce you to our second guest speaker, who has spent 8 years serving older adults in a variety of roles. Currently, she is a certified therapeutic recreation specialist at Beatitudes campus in Phoenix and an educator for Comfort Matters. She also serves as a field instructor for Arizona State University. Please give a warm welcome to Mollie Heiden.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm really excited and feel really blessed to be here with you all. Like they said, I'm a certified therapeutic recreational specialist, which is an area that's a little lesser known, but we are a sister therapy of occupational therapy, art therapy, music therapy, and kind of work in the same vein. So in my day-to-day life, I am working in the field. I work on a floor with residents, and that's normally what my day looks like. So this is a real treat to be here with you guys and share some of the stuff I know. All right. Did it change? Yay. So these are our learning objectives for today. Tena gave us a lot of really good, meaty kind of stuff we got to chew on. And I really want to give you guys some practical things that you can take with you when you're visiting your loved ones, when you're at work, when you're doing your practicums through school, just things to build up some confidence and help you connect with folks. So first thing we're going to talk about is a little more about the five senses and how they relate to connection with people and with emotions. We're going to learn how the five senses can lead to meaningful engagement, and we're going to gain some tools for how we can set our folks up for success. So the first thing I'm going to do here, as a rec therapist, I cannot help myself but do an activity. So we are going to do a little activity together. I hope y'all will kind of have fun with it. It's maybe a little silly feeling, but I think you will enjoy it. So we're going to go through a little guided meditation. It's a progressive relaxation technique. So we're going to kind of bring everything down a little bit and then bring it all back up to get our brains and our bodies ready for a little more talking, and we're going to learn some stuff. So there will be some music playing, and I'll give some guided instructions, and just follow along as you feel comfortable. All right, so first I'd like you to sit comfortably in your chair, whatever position that means for you. Let's start by taking a nice deep breath in through our nose and blow it out through our mouths. And now if you feel comfortable, close your eyes for just a moment here. We're going to start down at our toes and work our way up the body. So relax your toes in your shoes. Don't scrunch them. Let them be still. Move into the balls of your feet. Move into your heels. Through your ankles and into your calves. Let the muscles relax. Let your knees relax. Move up through your thighs into your hips. Sit deeply into your chair. One more time, let's breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. Now check in with your lower back. Check in with the alignment of your hips. Are you sitting evenly in your chair? Is the pressure on your sit bones even? As we take another breath in, I want you to focus on your vertebrae. Feel the space expanding. Let it relax and create space. We're going to take 3 more deep breaths here. And with each breath, move up your spine. Lower back. Mid back. Upper back. Into your shoulders and your shoulder blades. And lastly, up into your neck. Now with your next breath in, as you breathe out, relax your shoulders down, drop them down from your ears. Now moving on to our hands. Let your palms face up to the ceiling. And slowly bring each of your fingers to touch your thumb, one at a time, at whatever pace feels good for you. Let your hands go still, relax in your lap. Take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Now I want you to scrunch up your whole face. Squeeze your eyes, wrinkle your nose, purse your lips. Hold it. And fully relax. One more time, scrunch up your facial muscles. Hold it. And relax. Now sit for just a moment. Feel your breath. Focus on your diaphragm, filling it with air before you blow it back out. Now we're going to start wiggling our toes, flexing our calf muscles. Move our knees from side to side. Move your hips side to side in your chair, and in the process, move our spines around a little bit. Roll your shoulders back, nice and big and slow. Give your arms a nice little shake. Cast a spell with our fingers. And now slowly open your eyes. Welcome yourself back into the room. Take a nice deep breath in through the nose. Blow it out through the mouth. All right. So that is just a little example of something I do at work. It helps us get in touch with a lot of sensations, lots of physical feelings in our body. Breath work also helps control sounds. It can make things a little more amplified. I'm sure we all heard the rain with the music, which was kind of a lovely little addition. So doing those kinds of check-ins with our bodies can really help us get in tune, and it's just how I wanted to start tonight. So thank you for bearing with me and giving it a try. All right. So a little bit more about the campus. Tena gave you guys some specifics. These are just some photos of my folks that I work with on a daily basis. So a little more about the work I do. I work on our early memory support floor in our care center, which is primarily folks who are in the mild to moderate stages of dementia. But I also do a lot of work in our wider community with our independent living. I do work with our more long-term care folks who maybe don't have a dementia diagnosis but need long-term care. So we're kind of all over the place. My team is interchangeable, and a huge part of our practice is the residents drive everything. So in independent living, honest to God, we don't do a whole lot. They kind of tell us what to do. They run the show. We book the rooms, we book the catering, and we provide support to them. But they have created numerous programs that have lasted for years, and it really is stuff they have ownership over. And since we believe in a continuum of care on the campus, a big goal is that as they move into assisted living or they move into the care center, we want that feeling to exist no matter where they are. And as Tena talked about, we may need to adapt that a little bit as their reasoning and their decision-making changes, but there's a lot that our folks can make choices about. There's a lot that they have control over, and so it's our job to make sure they get to do that on a daily basis. And a huge way that I find success in this is through the senses, and using that as a way to connect with them and see where that agency lives in their bodies and in their minds. Tena talked about it a little bit and showed you guys some slides of the brain and the way that the brain changes as we progress through dementia. So the outer areas of the brain begin to shrink. We lose mass, we lose volume in the brain. But the part of the brain that doesn't go away is the center, the core of the brain. And that's where our emotional center sits. So our emotions remain intact, regardless of where we are in the disease process. And all of us, I think, can think about how our senses connect directly to emotion and to feeling. Examples I can give is, as a child, we went to the public library a lot, and to this day, if I'm with my mom and we go to the library, we step in and library smell. You know, we say that. It's like, this is a safe, comfortable space to be because it's familiar. Or I think the taste of coffee for a lot of us, or tea for some of us, is something that means home and means comfort. So being able to recognize for each person where these senses sit and how we can use that to bond and to connect and to understand. And knowing that it brings us directly to their brain and it's directly a way to connect. So this is kind of the motto that we live by. Tena talked about this a little bit, the way reasoning is hard to work with. We cannot always change the way our folks with dementia think or how they reason, but we always have the ability to change the way they feel, always. And I want to share with you guys a little story about a resident. This is a little video, we'll watch it in just a second. This resident lived on my floor for about 3 years, primarily through the COVID pandemic, which was a really difficult time for many of us. I'm sure we all have stories we could share. And she was a person she was an educator. She taught people how to build labyrinths. She lived in the Tucson desert for most of her life in the wilderness. And she felt very connected to nature and very safe and at home in isolation and in the desert. That was her home. But she experienced a lot of anxiety through the pandemic, and especially being on a floor and not having the same access to the outdoors that she once did. And she would get very easily overstimulated. You know, we have lots going on. There's nurses and CNAs, and there's families visiting, and our dining room is right off the elevator. So there's just a lot that's happening because it's a busy place. And we would be doing an activity, and I'd see her there, and for the beginning, she'd be having a great time. But sometimes by the end of the activity, it was really just becoming too much. She'd get tearful, she'd get really restless, she would sometimes get really repetitive in her speech. So all those things we talked about with the pain ad, she's showing me very clear signs of discomfort and distress. And I could sit with her and say, it's all okay, everything's gonna be fine. I could say that till I went blue in the face, but it was not going to connect with her. And the thing that worked for this resident every time without fail was going to sit outside where it was quiet, where the sun could touch her skin, and sometimes, if she was in the mood, playing Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald, and just giving her time. I didn't talk to her when we did this. I didn't touch her. It was just time to be by herself, which is something she really valued. So I want you to think about that anxious, high energy, tearful, and consolable thing I just described. And then in this video, we're gonna watch how she responded after 5 minutes sitting outside. So you can see in that video how, you didn't see, it's very small because she barely moves. She's very still. It's the video on the slide. It looks like a picture. That's how still she is. It's not a picture, that was a video. So she is so calm and still. Her muscles are so relaxed. You guys all thought it was a picture. That was a video. So it took 5 minutes, and she was a brand new person. And after those 5 minutes, I could talk with her. I could say, tell me about the desert. Tell me about your favorite thing about living out there. Did you ever get scared? Did you ever think a coyote was going to come into your house? And she'd laugh, and she'd tell me all these wonderful stories and tell me about the places she traveled. But until I changed her environment and followed her lead, I was never going to get there. And I love this story and I love this video because I think it shows the simplicity in the approach. I didn't need to do anything excessive. I didn't need to use medication. All I needed to do was change something for her so that she could feel the peace and the calm that she needed in that moment. So I kind of want to go into each sense a little bit here and talk a little bit more about the role and the place of it. And I have just a few things typed up here. I could go on for several nights about all the way the senses can engage people, and y'all can think about your own thoughts and answers here. But these are just some kind of important ones I really see reoccurring when we think about the senses and connecting with folks. So for taste, I think the first one we all think of is nutrition. We need food for nutrients and for health. And that's a very important thing, especially if we have folks who maybe were very healthy their whole lives, right? Or if have very specific diets. We talked about that with some of the facilities the last few days, that maybe they have a hunter-gatherer diet, maybe they have a Greek diet, right? There's things that were important to them in their lives that needs to be recognized regardless of their diagnosis. So making sure that their nutritional desires and preferences are being acknowledged is a wonderful way to connect and show somebody respect. Enjoyment is also a huge part of eating. We eat a lot of things just because they taste good and we like them. And being able to recognize that and understand the importance of that is really something wonderful. Tena talked a little bit about how our taste buds change as we age. One of the senses in our taste buds that lasts the longest, the flavor that lasts the longest, is sweet. So most of our folks, as they progress through this, are going to want sweet, soft things to eat. And I think it's our gut instinct to say, but you need to have your vegetables, you need to have your protein, and you need to have your starch. But if that's not enjoyable for them, it's not going to be meaningful for them. So if they have a milkshake for 3 meals a day, they have a milkshake for 3 meals a day. That's okay. Sensation is also a big thing. I can speak about my husband, who cannot stand cottage cheese or lumpy mashed potatoes. You know, the texture is really important for him when he's eating. And there's a lot of folks who have that experience. You know, if they're going to eat a piece of fried chicken, it better be a well-done piece of fried chicken if they've made fried chicken their whole life. So understanding the importance of sensation when people are eating is also very important to connect and, again, show that respect and understanding. It's also common as we progress that the way we use our senses to interact with the world can revert in some ways. So if we think about when we're younger, sometimes we put things in our mouth as a, I wonder what that might be kind of reaction. And that can happen again as the disease progresses, or something you're working with might resemble food. Paint might look like yogurt to you, and you might think, let me take a taste of that. So that's something important to keep in mind when you're doing engagement and you're doing activities or you're helping with showers or with eating at a mealtime. How could things be perceived to somebody as their brain and their logic is changing? And how can I make sure I'm thinking about that when I'm planning ahead? And then for all of these, I actually have nostalgia, because I think that is the thing that connects us the most to our senses. That's why I like the library smell, because it is home and it is comfort and it's safety. It's why people want fried chicken on a certain day of the week, because they had fried chicken on that day every week. So understanding a person's past routines and their past preferences and what that meant to them is going to be really important for that connection. Then with smell. I think a big thing with smell is environment. I think about how I feel when you step outside first thing in the morning. This morning when we walked outside, it was like, it smells like fall here. It smells crisp, it smells good. And that is a really powerful thing for a lot of people. Smelling coffee in the morning cues you to the fact that it's time for breakfast. It can help guide you through the rest of your day. So understanding the way that smells can help orient someone to where they are and what's going on is a really important tool to think about. Maybe for our folks helping with showers, someone took a shower every morning. Maybe they're resisting the shower. Maybe they need to have a cup of coffee before they have their shower to help them understand, I'm waking up, it's the morning. The next thing I would do is take a shower to get ready for my day. There's little tips and tricks like that you can use to make things better. Like I was talking about, smell is also time of day. I think another thing that can happen is if folks are sleeping later, maybe they're waking up at lunchtime, and to us we're saying, well, it's noon, it's time to eat lunch. For them, it's breakfast. So they're gonna want breakfast smells. They're not gonna want to smell lunch smells, they're gonna wanna smell breakfast smells. So what can we do to change that so that we're meeting them where they are existing in their time and their place, rather than us trying to get them to change? That always works much better if we change for them than us changing them for us. Identification is another huge part of smell. Another personal story I can relate to this is my mom has used the same shampoo and lotion her entire life. And my siblings and I used to run into her room and put our face in her pillow and say, it smells like mom, because that's what we think of when we smell it. So for a lot of our folks, yes, recognizing us might change over time, but there are going to be smells that they associate with a time and a place or with a person. So smells can be huge for identifying who they're with, where they are, what's happening. Same thing with smells smelled in church. Frankincense is used a lot in a lot of services in different religions. Smelling that can be a way to orient to what's going on and what season or what celebration might be taking place. Smells are also very useful for energy. We think about lavender versus lemon. They do different things. Lavender is a soothing smell. Lemon is an energizing smell. So maybe incorporating that into what you're doing to see how it can change the way somebody is interacting with an experience. And again, nostalgia. What smells make your person feel comfortable and feel safe? It's always something we want to consider. Now, touch. Touch is one that I think can get tricky, can always be tricky. I'm hopping ahead a little bit, but touch can be triggering. And that's something we have to really think about when we're interacting with folks. There are people who do not want to be hugged. There are people who do not want you to touch their shoulder, who feel uncomfortable with that. Culturally, that can be something that's not accepted, depending on their background. And knowing that and understanding that is a better way to show respect. We may think this is how I comfort, but it's not how they're comforted. So knowing that is so important. But for some who do enjoy touch, it can be a huge source of reassurance. And I think a lot of us in our professions or in our relationships, touch is so core to what we do. It's almost impossible not to touch somebody throughout the day because of what we're doing. We're aiding somebody in walking from one place to another. We're guiding them to a place. We're helping in a shower. We're helping in the bathroom. It's really hard to avoid. So making sure the way we are touching provides reassurance rather than inciting anxiety is a really important thing to consider. Something as simple as saying, is it okay if I touch your elbow? I think there's a way a tone is interpreted and they can still respond to say yes or no. And their body language in responding to you touching them, you must pay attention to that so you know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Touch can also bring a lot of relief. I know for us who like touch, a massage is like the best thing in the world. It helps us relax, it helps us soothe. Even tonight in our guided meditation, y'all did self-touch. There's a lot of techniques that are used for relaxation that don't involve another person touching you or can involve you touching something that brings you comfort and relief. So thinking about touch in both ways. Touch is one of those special senses where the person can be touching something and they can also be touched by someone, and thinking about the difference between those two things. And again, nostalgia. I can say that for me, my mom played with my hair all the time when I was a kid, and when I get my hair played with, it is like I am transported to another world. So thinking about those things. Sound. I think this is one we all relate to so much. Like Tina said, we can think of a favorite song and it instantly changes our mood. Sound can also be a huge motivator for movement. Again, that idea of, are we winding down from the day or are we amping up for the day? Maybe if we're just waking up, we're gonna play, Good Morning from Singing in the Rain, and it's gonna get somebody up out of bed and have them excited to start their day. Or maybe it's Lovely Day instead. Depends on the person, depends on what they wanna hear. So thinking about how music can help with movement. Another thing I use music for a lot is in exercise programs. It's a motivational tool. How the music changes throughout and comes back down lets people know what we're getting into. And it can help with playing games, all that kind of stuff. It's just a way to help somebody kind of know what's going on. Music is also very tightly related to identity. If you're a deadhead, you're a deadhead, and you're committed to that. So knowing what music matters to people and knowing how they need it incorporated into their lives to feel themselves being represented is really important. And it might mean that they're playing music that their neighbor is not a huge fan of. So how do we make sure both of those people get their enjoyment at the same time? That can always be a challenge, but there's ways to do it. Headphones are a wonderful invention. Sound can also provide tranquility. And I think with that, that can be the presence of music or of birds or of rain, but it can also be the absence of sound. So with all of these senses, I think that's important to consider that the presence of a sense can be really helpful, but a presence of a sense can also be very harmful. Backtracking a little bit, a lot of folks, when they're having headaches or migraines, strong smells make it worse. Bright lights make it worse. So knowing that and being able to adjust the environment as they're needing is really important. And again, nostalgia. I think we all can think of a favorite Christmas song or the first song we learned to play on the piano or a song our mom used to sing to us when we were going to bed. So being able to tie in the nostalgia as much as possible into their routine is going to be a really wonderful way to connect. And sight. Sight is important for orientation. I think the buildings we've been in the last few days are wonderful at creating these fluid spaces where people can see different things and travel within a space independently. And that's something that's really beautiful and really special. Wayfinding is really important for that autonomy and for that independence that we can give to folks. So thinking of the way we set up their bedrooms, the way that obstacles in their room are removed or changed so that they can move about their space freely is really important. And with that, thinking about impairments they may have with their sight. Are they nearsighted? Are they farsighted? Do they use an assistive device? All that kind of stuff. Sight is familiarity. Again, I know it's very common that people start to forget our names as things change, but a lot of times they see you and they know you somehow, and they still feel that feeling when they see you. And if they don't remember your name, it doesn't mean that they don't feel it the same way they used to when they saw you. Or if they've always owned corgis, if they see a picture of a corgi, they're going to have an elated response to seeing a picture of a corgi and probably tell you about the 7 corgis they owned over the course of their life and all their names and all their favorite activities, and it will elicit things from them. So knowing those things about our folks and being able to incorporate it in their lives is huge. I think sight is also something that inspires wonder. Having visuals around that are enriching, like these beautiful panels on the back wall. There's lots of great art in this facility that maybe cause some wonder or cause some awe, or watching a video about a place they've never been before and getting that exposure. Watching videos of babies, I think, inspires a lot of wonder in a lot of people. Babies laughing, puppies fighting, those kinds of things make us all go, mushy at the same way. So being able to incorporate that into the day-to-day. Prompting is also a huge part of sight. So again, thinking about how we're setting up the rooms, thinking about how we're setting up the dining room table, thinking about how we're setting up their bathroom space. How can we set up visuals that are going to prompt them to be as independent as possible? Is their toothbrush easy to find? Is their toothpaste right next to night cream that has almost an identical tube? And how will that affect their ability to do something on their own? It's little things like that that you want to consider. Again, we're not thinking with our brains, we're thinking with their brain. So being able to step into their shoes and see things from their perspective is a wonderful tool and a huge, huge thing to do. And again, nostalgia, I think one that's a funny thing that has come up a lot in my work is there's always, every year, a huge debate over colored Christmas lights or white Christmas lights. And people have really strong opinions about that. So one year we had to have a Christmas tree that had white and a Christmas tree that had color because I was going to ruin somebody's day by not having the right kind of lights on the Christmas tree. So knowing those kinds of things and what nostalgia connects us to visual things are really important. And then I want to talk a little bit about stimulation. Because like we talked about, all of these things are very stimulating. And we always run the risk of overstimulation and understimulation. They can look the same sometimes, which can be really complicated to try to figure out which one is happening right now. But I tried to make little 3-word things that are all the same letters, so maybe they're easy to remember, just as the things I primarily see happening with each. So with overstimulation, we see a lot of dysregulation, a lot of issues with that ability to calm ourselves. Sometimes they might look flushed because their blood pressure is going up, regulating emotions, even regulating your stomach, your bowels when you're stressed out or irritated, that can get really affected. So your body is just really out of whack when we're overstimulated. You can be really easily distracted. This might be the time that we see folks struggling to finish a meal, struggling to stay in an activity for more than 10 minutes, struggling to engage in a conversation because they can't stop, looking which way or another. And then that distress. So really, that video I showed you, where it didn't look like she was moving, I think of her a lot when I think of being overstimulated. Just not being able to find that calm and that peace, whatever that may be for that person. With understimulation, you can see those things. But another thing we can see sometimes is lethargy. We see some isolation, some lack of motivation, some trouble feeling a call to get up and get going. That can be a huge sign that somebody's not feeling the kind of stimulation they need. We may be offering them every activity on the calendar or offering them every different resource we have, but if it's not what they want, they're not going to be drawn to it. Listlessness is a huge part of that. I'm sure all of us have heard the term wandering. It's not my favorite term in the world. It's hard when we don't have other ones. But that not knowing what to do, the not knowing where to go or where to put the energy is a huge sign that understimulation is happening. They need somewhere to put themselves, put whatever they're feeling in their body. So being able to identify that and then say, what is it they might need right now? What sense can I tap into that's going to make this person feel purpose in the moment? And then that lack of peace. So that's kind of a thing that I think is the same between the two, is this distressed, just not knowing what to do and not feeling calm. That can be very present in both. So you always want to pay attention when you're engaging with somebody, and especially using the senses. And if you're in a group, you got to check in with every person, and it might be working for one person and it might not be working for another. And having a game plan with your team, which is everyone here, it's family, it's staff, it's everyone there. How are they going to come step in and help us get that person comfortable? So then I want to talk a little bit about meaningful engagement and how we can use all of these senses to work towards something that has meaning to people. So the biggest thing I think that's important for making it meaningful is knowing the person. If you don't know your person's past and preferences, likes, dislikes, you're not going to be able to design a routine and a program that meets those person's needs. So first and foremost, I think it's important to identify the sensory preferences, which Tena talked about with the pain plan. But if you have those sensory preferences identified upon move-in or upon admission, it's going to give you a toolkit for if pain occurs or if distress occurs. You don't have to call someone to find out. You have it there already. It's already available to you. So making sure you have that somewhere, have those written down. Figuring out how you can incorporate those preferences into their daily life. Think about the routines that existed before. Earlier I gave the example of if someone was a morning showerer, how did that work in their routine? Some people, it's the very first thing they do when they wake up. Some people eat breakfast, read the newspaper, have coffee before they go get in the shower. So how are we going to make sure that either of those is being reflected in their day? Maybe in the shower they always played music. They don't like a quiet shower. Incorporate that into their shower experience. Maybe they don't take showers. Maybe they take baths. How are we going to respect that in their new situation when baths can be a little more tricky? How do we respect that routine for somebody? The biggest part of this is once you know the information, everybody needs to know it, right? The whole team needs to know. The family needs to know, the care team, but also the person. It's really important if we're able to include the person we're caring for in their care plan. Saying to them, would you like to take a shower in the morning? Because maybe their preferences have changed. That does happen, where a morning shower can become an afternoon shower. There's lots of other situations where this happens. That's just a good example to use. And that's where the reevaluating comes in, is that one thing might work for the first year they live there, and all of a sudden it might stop working. That's very common. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you didn't understand them. It just means they changed, which we're all capable of doing. Another huge thing we have control over, and is something I really believe in, is how we create environments for people. We have beautiful facilities like this, but they need to feel like home. And if we're not careful, sometimes things can start to become feeling a little corporate, a little stale. I call it the dragon of corporateness that can occur. And so thinking about what does this person need in their space for it to feel comfortable and feel like home? So really it's observation, again, using our senses to see what we can do. How does the resident respond to their environment? Do they like eating in the dining room, or is that too overstimulating for them? Do they prefer to eat in a different space in the neighborhood, or do they like to eat by themselves? Some people like to eat alone. It's not a bad thing. Big things to consider. Temperature is a huge one. Our folks tend to be cold for a variety of reasons, but we also have folks who tend to run hot. And so how do we marry those two when we have someone who's saying, I'm so hot, and someone saying, I'm so cold? How do we make sure both of those people are comfortable in the same space? Noise level is another thing that's really big to consider. Maybe some people don't mind a rowdy dining room, but other people feel really overwhelmed by that, or don't like rowdy activities. Maybe that's not part of their plan, to invite them to the more excited things that we're doing. Seating options are huge as well. I think it's really hard as folks maybe get to the point where they need to be in a wheelchair more often. It's not always the most comfortable thing to sit in for long periods of time, and it might feel weird if they're in a group. Why am I not sitting in a chair like everybody else? So is there an option or a possibility to get the team involved so that we can transfer them to a normal chair while they're doing the activity with us? What's actually keeping us from doing that? Is it that we just don't think we have the time to transfer them, or is it that they don't have the strength to transfer? Those are two very different things. So evaluating what's possible and seeing what we can do to keep things as normal and routine as possible. And lighting is another thing. Bright spaces can be overwhelming for folks. We were at a facility today where they had a beautiful quiet room that had the option of overhead lighting, or the big light, as a lot of people refer to it, but you could also turn the big light off and you could have lamps on for softer, calmer lighting. And yes, it makes it a little darker and harder to see, but if somebody's comfortable in that space, that's what's more important. And with that comes that freedom of choice, right? I think something that's common in our field is we want to protect. We want to keep people safe. We want to avoid falls. We want to avoid skin tears. We want to avoid injury, which is very logical and is very natural to us to want to protect. But we have to remember these are adults we are caring for who have a right to risk. It is their choice. It is their body. If they want to try walking, it's our job to find a way to try and make that happen, even if it's risky. And that's something that's supported by state regulation. It's part of the resident rights. They have a right to make choices, and they have a right to risk. So understanding that and knowing that it's our job to adapt things and modify them for them, but also recognizing how important maintaining that right is for our folks and allowing them freedom and autonomy of choice. And with that, adapting and modifying is a huge part. That can take some time to find the perfect thing. I think the most obvious one we think of is assistive devices, walkers, canes, all that kind of stuff. But there's lots of other things. There's adaptive silverware. It's maybe changing the way we're playing a game, changing the way they take in their food, modifying diets. There's all kinds of ways we can do this to make somebody more comfortable. And another thing that I think is really important to think about and sometimes gets forgotten, again, all of this comes back to us as much as it's about the resident. So how are we, as the visitors in their space, engaging in their space? We're in their home when we're at their facility visiting them. So we need to see ourselves as a guest more than as a fixture in the facility. And if somebody's watching TV, are we walking in front of the TV several times? If I was at home and somebody did that, I'd be a little bit peeved. I don't know about you guys. Or are they trying to read a book and I'm standing right next to them having a loud conversation about something? So being able to observe yourself in their environment and think, how am I changing the environment with my actions here, is a huge, huge skill to be able to develop. All right. This is a story I like to end a lot of my presentations on because it was a real situation I went through that taught me a lot and is something I try to carry with myself every day when I'm at work. So this is my Bessie boot story. So this took place during COVID, kind of in the heat of it. We couldn't have visitors in the building. We weren't even really supposed to go outside at this point. It was early, full PPE, the whole 9 yards. And I had a resident who gardened her entire life. She always had flowers in her front garden bed. And she would pick those flowers every week to refresh the flowers on her kitchen table, in her living room, wherever. And it was really deeply meaningful to her. And we used to go out into our community garden space and we'd pick the flowers, even if we weren't supposed to, and we'd put them in her room. And we weren't able to do that anymore. And we noticed a pretty severe change in her. Taking away that experience was changing her quality of life. So I ordered a bunch of garden beds and we put them in our sunroom inside, and we planted flowers with the idea that this brings the outside into her. I thought it was a pretty good idea. What ended up happening every day is Bessie would wheel herself down to the sunroom and not pick one flower, but grab the entire plant, rip it out of the ground, take it back to her room, and leave a beautiful trail of dirt for our housekeepers down the hallway, which I got yelled at for quite a bit. And I would go get the plants, and I'd go put them back in the dirt, and she'd do it every single day, several times a day. And I, would try to say, like, well, Bessie, let's pick the flowers instead. Let's that's what they're for picking. And it wasn't clicking. I was using logic. It wasn't gonna work. And I got so frustrated because it kind of got to the point where not just the housekeepers, but the director of nursing and all kinds of people said, you gotta get rid of the plants. This is becoming a problem. And I felt so defeated, and I felt like I failed her because I wasn't able to bring the outside in, which is what I wanted to do. And so instead, we took all the dirt out and we put silk flowers in. And what I learned was that that was what she needed. Because then she could pick her flowers without creating a mess, and she could arrange them throughout the neighborhood. So one day I came in and found her boot on the chair in the sunroom with an arrangement, and I asked her, why is that there? And she said, well, I left it there for people to see. So in allowing a change to happen, and not sticking with the plan I thought was perfect, she got what she needed, and she told me that if I had paid attention. So the tips I like to leave everybody with. As we know the person, as we're thinking about environments, we have to avoid assumptions. I assumed that the only thing that would matter to her was real flowers, and that wasn't true. The silk flowers meant just as much as the real thing. And as soon as I let go of that, it became a much more enriching experience for her. Connecting, not correcting. I think that's a really, again, natural instinct that we have, that when we're talking to somebody and they call us the wrong name or they misremember what year it is, we go, no, I'm not so-and-so, or it's 2024, not 2010. There's really no point in doing that. It's a waste of breath. It's gonna stress that person out. It might embarrass that person. Instead, be Sarah for the day. Who cares if it's not your name? It's who you are to them in that moment, and that's okay. It means that you get to connect with that person, and they get to feel connected to you and respected by you. So don't waste the time. Dignity and respect is all part of that, right? Not making somebody feel like they're being constantly monitored and looked at, and how do we change you, and allowing them that freedom and that choice, whatever that may be, goes such a long way. Words of encouragement are huge. After Bessie showed me this boot, I said, well, Bessie, I think you need to make a flower arrangement every morning and so we can put it out. And so we did that. We found a vase instead of a boot, even though I think the boot's really cute. And she would arrange flowers every morning, and we would set them out in a communal space. And she would bring people and say, here are my flowers. She was really proud of her flowers. And people saying to her, wow, those are so beautiful, changed her whole perspective. And she felt purpose in arranging the flowers for the floor every day. And creating that safe space. We made it so that it was something she could do on her own. She didn't need me to go with her to make the flower arrangement. She knew where the vase was. She'd go get the flowers. Even if she forgot where the vase was, she'd go get the flowers. And eventually she'd come down the way and someone would say, well, Bessie, would you like a vase to put those flowers in? And she'd say, well, yes, I would. And we'd put it in the vase for her. Again, what does she have the ability to do on her own, and how can we support that in her environment? So those are just kind of little tips I hope y'all can take away from that story, and just apply it in your approach every day.